I'm Norman Liss, and the name of the program is The Way to Go. I invite you to join me each week at this time as we explore places to go and things to do. The subject of today's program is Prince. Not royal princes, but prince in the art world. And my guest today is Susan Rubin, who is the project director at the exhibit running from March to May at the Katona Museum. Susan, we're going to learn all about a field that I really don't understand, and maybe that's how we ought to start. Why is this whole subject of Prince so misunderstood?
I think they're misunderstood because people have a hard time ranking the values in art when more than one exists. So it makes the idea of a multiple of something being original seem to be very contradictory.
So what is a print? It actually is copies of a piece of art, isn't it?
Well, they can be copies, but the kinds of prints that we're talking about are original pieces of art. And what a print is an image that's taken from some other matrix, in this case a block, plate, or stone, that in which an image is, design is cast, and then you take the image from that. So part of the reason to go back to why prints are misunderstood is because they seem to be secondary items from where they originally came from.
Secondary meaning that it wasn't...
It's taken from some other matrix, that we call it, and then it is made in an addition. And so generally more than one exists.
So people who are creating prints are creating them as an art form, or is it a reproduction of, say, a masterpiece that people have decided to make prints of? Well,
it can be either, but in its purest form, if you consider to be an original work of art, which the artist himself has worked on and determined that a print is the way that his image has to exist in order to represent his ideas, then it can be either of those. And that's part of also the reason why they're misunderstood.
Because it's not just one thing, it's several things, actually.
Yes.
So let's talk about the exhibit at the Katona Museum, one of my favorite museums. What is this exhibit all about?
This exhibit is going to teach people and hopefully excite them about the art of printmaking and explain to them the processes and a little bit of the history and the techniques that go into making prints, which have an almost 500-year history.
How is it done? How is the exhibit doing that?
It's set up in 2 galleries, and there will be 96 works on display, which almost all of them come from the Davison Art Center at Wesleyan University.
What about that Davison Center?
Well, it's really a gem of a collection. It's the name of the collection, Davison Art Center, is the result of a bequest that was given to the university in the 1950s by an alumnus, George Davison, who was an avid collector of prints, and over the years collected things that were sort of popular in his time, old master prints, French, European, and other European prints. He gave his collection to the university in 1953, and since then there have been 3 curators which have increased the collection to number over 20,000 items, and also includes a history of photography.
And this exhibit is using part of that collection, obviously. You certainly couldn't...
Yes, almost entirely, yes.
How was the selection done?
Well, I worked with the curator there, Ellen Dench, and we came up with... The idea for the exhibit came about because we talked about all the different things that we hear people talk about when it comes to prints. You know, what are they? Are they original? What is it? How is it made? And we decided to answer those questions. And therefore, we've set up the exhibit in different sections. And we've broken it down into sections about media, how they're done, and then sections which answer the questions that come up about prints. Are they forgeries? How is the quality? How is it made? And then another gallery that's all about contemporary prints and how contemporary artists have sort of exploded by expanding the possibilities for working on the print surface.
We have some illustrations that we're going to be able to show today, and why don't we talk about them a little bit?
Okay. Well, the first one that we can look at is a woodcut by Albrecht Dürer. He is a German artist, foremost printmaker, and it's a woodcut portrait of the humanist scholar Georg Warmbuehler, and it's from the 16th century. And in woodcut, the artist digs his tool into a block of wood so that there's gouging out of the surface, and then after he covers it in ink, and a piece of paper is laid over and an impression is taken. So in fact, what you've actually cut out on your surface appears white on your paper. And this is a print which we know exists in many impressions, and it was done in woodcut because that was a fairly easy medium to reproduce.
Now you talk about many impressions. What is the value? Why do people collect? Do they collect because they're beautiful, because they're unique, because they're valuable, because they collect them for investment? Why?
Well, you can collect for all different kinds of reasons. The notion of how many impressions comes from is really an artist's decision. This is an engraving by Matham of the artist Heinrich Goltzius, and it's in the technique of engraving. And this is a very precise and arduous medium to work in because it involves not carving out in wood, but carving directly into metal. The advantage of it is that it makes it very easy to copy other works because it's a very precise system, as you can see. Today, engraving is done mostly, or seen mostly, on dollar bills. This is a case where an artist copied the work of another artist. But it is considered original because he worked on it himself.
I'm still confused over this whole subject of, now you're talking about an artist copying the work of another artist. We talk about an artist who actually carved in a piece of wood. Is there any generic, is there overall view of what prints are? How are they made? Is it a photographic process? I don't understand any of that.
Well, it's probably the most often asked question, and it's really the most complex to answer because right when you think you sort of have a definition of it, someone comes along and tries to play with that definition. For example, in the early 60s, the Print Council of America came out with guidelines for what made an original print. And it included, among other things, that it had to have original markings on it by the artist. Well, then the pop artists came along, and Lichtenstein and Rauschenberg, etc., immediately started using portions of pop culture and pieces of collage and things in their prints. So that sort of exploded the whole notion of what made an original print. Basically, what you like to think of is that the artist, and this would be a guideline for judging all arts, an artist feels that in a print, if he chooses the medium of a print, that he is expressing or reinterpreting or re-representing material that he can do in no other fashion.
Now, is there a precise reason why prints are numbered?
Well, as prints were not actually numbered until the 19th century, and it was sort of a clever merchandising strategy to somehow equate the rarity of them or the limited number of them with their value. It also served the purpose, because photography was being invented then, of separating the artist from the so-called technician who merely chemically reproduced images. So the numbering of them is a fairly recent occurrence, and it doesn't rank the order of the printing or the quality. It's just a matter of numbering them for purely numbered sake.
Now, they're in color, they're in multicolor, they're in two colors, as the one we're looking at right now in black and white, and this is a face, actually, isn't it? What is it?
This is a portrait by Chuck Close, who's a contemporary American artist, and he's one of the most active printmakers doing portraits today. This is called Keith, and it's done in the technique of mezzotint, which, unlike the other two prints we saw where there's a gouging out of a surface, this is done by covering a plate first in ink and then taking your tools and almost like an eraser rubbing off the surface so that you bring an image out from dark to light.
Oh, I've seen some of Chuck Close's work, and they're enormous.
Yes.
Are they prints or?
Well, he's also a painter, but his prints measure up, for example, to 3 by 4 feet, as this one does.
So is there a limitation on size?
No
of a
limitation.
print? No limitation. No. I suppose coming up to the Katona Museum and seeing this exhibit is going to tell me a lot of things that I'm asking about now. I haven't seen the exhibit yet. But so prints are not just something that paper is applied to a surface and then it's reproduced. It's so much bigger. You can work in a large surface. You work in many different media. It seems...
Yes, and you can combine the media.
It's vast. And how about value? I touched on value, and maybe we got off that subject. What about value? Where does value come in? What makes a print a good investment?
Well, I guess there are criteria that you follow to determine the quality or value of a print. The two, obviously, of course, after if it's something that you like and you've done your homework on it and you know the history of the print, then you want to determine the quality of the impression, which refers to the actual print itself. And you look for things like creases of the paper, or if there's blobs of ink in a corner which weren't intended. That's the quality of the impression. Or if it's a very faded impression when it should be very dark and rich.
Is rarity a factor?
Well, it really depends on what kinds of prints from what period that you're talking about. You might also want to look at condition, which doesn't refer to the print itself, but what has actually happened to the print since it's left the printing press. If you find a Rembrandt in your Aunt Sadie's musty basement, it's probably going to have little yellow specks on it from being exposed to dampness. If it's a color print that's been hanging in a sunny window, then it's probably faded and concurrently its value will have decreased.
When prints are numbered now, let's say there's a limited run of 100 prints made, is number one more valuable than number 100?
No, not at all. You always have to trust your eyes and look at the print and make sure that somehow the colors and the printing and the paper look right to you. But the way that prints are numbered now, one doesn't necessarily mean that it was the first one pulled off the press. It's merely a matter for ranking them. And when you see numbers on prints, they always appear as fractions. And the bottom number indicates the total number in the edition, and the top part of the number indicates how that print was numbered in the edition.
It's a subject that has a lot more depth to it than what we're talking about. My guest today is Susan Rubin, who is the project director of the exhibit at the Katona Museum on prints. And we're learning a lot today about a subject that I haven't known very much about, and I assume that not many of the viewers have. We're looking at a print now.
This is a woodcut by Francesco Clemente. He's a contemporary Italian artist. This is a self-portrait that he did in 1984. What's very interesting about this print is that although it's a woodcut, it's very different from the first woodcut that we looked at by Dürer. This actually has the appearance of a watercolor. And this was done in a very interesting project with his printer and publisher, in which Clemente first made a watercolor that probably looked like this, and he sent it off to Japan. And craftsmen there reproduced his work onto a woodblock, and very skilled craftsmen carved this woodblock to emulate the look of a watercolor. And they did this by feathering and serrating the edges of the wood so that when it was printed, it had this very watery look to it.
Have techniques changed?
Basically, no. Since they've been invented, beginning with woodcut in the 15th century, the techniques have basically remained the same. It's the manner in which you apply them. And really you can follow, if you did a timeline through history of the points in time when the different techniques arrived, you see that they're all in response to artists really searching for better ways to reproduce the effects that they could get by drawing or painting directly on paper.
How about the modern technology and science and photographic process, and that hasn't affected, there hasn't been any revolution that took place in printmaking in the last decade or 2 decades? So much has happened.
Well, artists have begun to use photographs and photogravures in their prints, and it raises that question again about does that make it an original print? There's a print in the exhibition by Sherry Levine who's known for appropriating images of other artists, really particularly male artists. But she photographed a photograph and then combined it with another printing plate, and in so doing gives it new meaning. So, you know, it's questionable how you feel about it, but in that it has a new meaning for her, and so we're kind of a political one, I suppose. It could be argued.
So the subject, as I hear us discussing it, is one that's full of some controversy?
Yes, and it's always an open subject, and as soon as you think you sort of have it figured out, somebody comes along and does something even more innovative.
It's evolving, and it's probably going to continue to evolve.
Sure.
Because of the experimentation, the techniques, the discoveries that artists are making and going in new directions.
And I think one of the interesting things about prints, once you sort of delve into them, aside from just looking at the prints and appreciating their aesthetic qualities, is trying to understand the history behind it and trying to figure out what the artist was thinking when he chose the techniques that he's using in his subject matter. And that's really what makes prints interesting, because unlike a painting, a so-called original painting or drawing where only one exists, prints give you the opportunity to understand an artist's thought process to arrive at a final image, which is what we can see with this print up now. And if you just put up the second print with it, you will see that we have a print, an etching by Bracquemont, who was a French artist in the 19th century, and this is an etching. The print on the right is the first stage in his print, where he was testing out to see how his print was coming along, and there's a lot of blank areas there where he hasn't worked yet. The print on the left is 8 stages along, where the print is almost complete, and he pulled another proof, and he's done a lot more work on the code and on the book and a lot of more details to fill it in. So this is an example of where you can sort of see an artist's thought process evolving through his works, because the stages for each of these prints exists.
Let's talk about the exhibit itself now. How is it presented? The 2 sections have names in a way.
Well, this section that where everybody will learn a little something about media and the variety of techniques is represented with all prints of the human face. And they begin with Dürer and they end within the last 10 years. So we'll see 500 years of printmaking in the human face. And that gallery goes on to really sort of be your teaching gallery, and where you'll come up against restrikes and states and papers and all these different choices that artists have to make. And then in the second gallery will all be contemporary prints, where you'll be able to sort of stand back and look at all of these prints, and some will be familiar, that artists have been doing within the last 30 years.
So the first gallery says, here's the educational part, learn about it, and then take all this knowledge that you've gained in the last room and come over here and go experience it yourself. Are there many exhibits that run of this nature as extensive on prints, or is this something that...
Not many that I know of, and that was one of our reasons for wanting to do it. Of course, there are a lot of books that are written on the history of printmaking and on process, and there are a lot of wonderful books, and you can see a lot of these things reproduced in books, but there's something different about having the experience firsthand. And we felt that with this collection, which is very well known in museum and academic circles and to print collectors, but perhaps not as well known to the general public, that it was a very nice opportunity for people to see things like this, because it's not often where you can choose which Rembrandt you'd like to hang, as an example. For example, the Rembrandt that we're looking at now is one of two that we'll be showing in the exhibit. And this is a very famous print that he did. It's called the 100 Guilder print, or Christ being presented to the people. It's lovely, and it's very typical of Rembrandt's work. What you're going to see in the exhibition alongside of it is supposedly the same print, but that was printed almost 150 years after Rembrandt's death. Now, the person who did this did not intend to fool the public. He was actually a Rembrandt enthusiast and who had acquired many of Rembrandt's plates after his death and decided to go ahead and print them up himself. And he went back into Rembrandt's plates and he fixed them up, and he dug them out a little bit and he cleaned them up, and he printed off his own edition, and he actually exhibited it in an exhibition. He was so proud of his handiwork. Well, people were thrilled to have it. Rembrandt was a very popular artist even then. And when that print wore down, he cut the plate up into 4 sections and printed it in red ink, which Rembrandt never would have done, on 4 sheets of paper. So I think that many people are going to be fooled when they see these two prints side by side. And we're going to have the answers concealed behind labels. So because there's
a little bit of a quiz in there.
Yes.
You're going to be tested on this, right?
There's going to be a test.
And do people have a tendency to kind of look with disdain on prints because it's not original art? Does it have a negative image?
Not negative so much as maybe just a little bit confused. I think, with the whole thing of posters and artists not working on their own plates and stories of artists signing paper before prints were done, it just makes it confusing. But it's just something that sort of has to be sorted out, and hopefully that should be flipped over, upside down. Hopefully this will explain it to people a little bit better and see that it's not such a confusing topic after all.
That was an interesting comment that you just made in the middle of that, saying upside down. As these 2 illustrations, copies of prints were being put up for the camera, they were put up in the wrong direction. And a lot of times you have a feeling, I know when I was looking at these with you beforehand, the Chuck Close I had upside down, didn't realize it was a face. Is that a problem? Which side is up?
I guess it could be. I don't know if it's symptomatic, though, of the medium.
I suppose when you're talking about non-representational art, any side could be up.
Sure.
And how do museums know which side to hang up? Are they always marked?
Well, sometimes they've been known to make mistakes.
And how do you make a judgment of which way to hang it? Do you ever feel that this is something I have to check on to see whether I've got it right or not?
There might have been a couple of times, yeah.
Putting together an exhibit like this can be an enormous job, I would imagine. Does it take a lot of time and a lot of research?
It takes a lot of time. We started 2 years ago, and even though we always sort of knew what we wanted to do, it takes time to evolve, and you have to bone up on your facts and check your resources and make sure that you have to look and look again and really make sure that you've explained thoroughly and clearly and accurately.
And then you have to determine actually not only which ones you're going to use, but where you're going to hang them and what the material is, I suppose, the written material to describe it. Sure.
And there's a almost fully illustrated catalog with an essay that accompanies this.
And who did that catalog?
The curator of the collection, Ellen Dench, yes.
One of the things that we want to do before we run out of time is to make sure that we give a telephone number that people can call so that they want to get information about the hours at the Katona Museum and directions if they don't know where it is. So what is the telephone number to call? It's
914-232-9555.
It's an easy number, but let's repeat it anyway, just in case someone didn't have a pen handy.
232 888-9555, and it's a 914 area code.
Okay, and as we usually do on this program, in the closing credits, we'll put the number up on the screen again so people can do that. Is there a better way to see this exhibit? We talked about first seeing the one room and getting educated, and then going, and then will it tell us enough about what to look for, or do we just let it happen to us?
Well, I think that you're going to get an awful lot of information when you come to this exhibit.
Not too much?
No, not too much, but there's a lot to digest.
How much time do you think that one should devote to coming up and seeing this exhibit?
Well, I would say an afternoon, but an hour.
I always have the feeling when I go to a museum that if I spend too much time, there's too much to absorb. I'm better off coming back at a different time. And do you think that this is worth several visits?
Oh, sure, because I think you start to see things, as probably with anything that you didn't see the first time, or that you want to come back, and that you notice a little work that you didn't see before. But that also goes along with the manner in which that this exhibition came together, which we were just talking about. That you keep going back and looking and seeing things, and
it's kind of the way I read a nonfiction book. Is I go through it and skim very fast, and I go through it a second time and pick up what I missed the first time, and then go on from there. Well, talk about skimming through. This interview with you has gone very, very fast, and we've run out of time, and I thank you very, very much for being here today. I'm sure people will enjoy seeing the exhibit at the Katona Museum. The exhibit runs from March to mid-May. It's on prints. You're going to learn a lot more than we were able to cover in the time we had available. It's at the Katona Museum. I'm Norman Liss. The name of the program is The Way to Go. Until next week at this time, enjoy yourself.